July 18, 2012. Nokia's stock hit €1.33. A company that once ruled nearly half the mobile world had just lost 98% of its value. Not dropped, not declined, erased. For over a decade, Nokia wasn't just winning the market, it defined it. It powered 4% of an entire country's GDP and connected hundreds of millions daily. Now it was being crushed by a new reality it refused to accept. On one side, Nokia, built on hardware, scale, and past success. On the other, a new ecosystem driven by software, touchscreens, and developers. This wasn't just competition, it was old logic fighting a new world. And Nokia didn't just lose that fight, it collapsed in slow motion. But here's what makes this story different. Because that €1.33 wasn't the end of Nokia, it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Nokia didn't start as a tech company. It started as a paper mill in 1865, deep inside Finland's forests. For over a century, it made rubber boots, cables, and industrial goods. Nothing about it suggested global dominance. So how did this quiet company end up ruling the world? The answer came in 1992 when Jorma Ollila made a radical decision. He looked at a struggling mobile division and saw the future. Then he did what most leaders wouldn't dare. He sold everything else. Paper, rubber, cables, all gone. Nokia stopped being diversified and became completely exposed. That decision looked reckless, but within a few years it looked inevitable. By 2000, Nokia wasn't just winning, it was carrying an entire nation. It generated 4% of Finland's GDP and dominated 70% of its stock market. One company had become the backbone of a country. And then came the product that made Nokia unstoppable. The Nokia 3310 wasn't just a phone. It was everywhere. Over 126 million units sold across every continent, every market. Simple, durable, and nearly indestructible. It didn't just sell, it defined what a phone should be. By 2007, Nokia controlled nearly 40% of the global mobile market, more than its three closest competitors combined. It wasn't competing anymore. It was setting the rules. If you bought a phone, it was probably Nokia. But that dominance hid something dangerous, because while Nokia was perfecting the present, the future was already being built somewhere else. January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked on stage and revealed the iPhone. It looked simple, a screen, no keyboard, and a bold promise. Most of the industry saw a luxury gadget. Nokia saw something even smaller, a niche experiment. So why did this moment quietly change everything? Inside Nokia, the reaction wasn't blind. An internal team studied the device within days. They warned that touchscreens could reset user expectations overnight. They saw the risk clearly, and they documented it. But that warning never became action. Leadership focused on what the iPhone lacked. It was expensive, fragile, and missing a physical keyboard. It failed Nokia's drop tests and broke their design logic. To them, this wasn't the future, it was a flawed product. And for a moment, the numbers seemed to agree. By the end of 2007, Nokia still dominated the market. Apple held less than 3% of smartphone sales. Nokia was scaling globally, while Apple was just starting. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. Nokia was still in control. But control and direction aren't the same thing. Because the real shift wasn't about hardware, it was about software, ecosystems, and developers. And while Nokia was measuring durability and cost, Apple was quietly redefining what a phone actually was. In 2008, Nokia looked stronger than ever. It sold 468 million phones in a single year. Market share climbed, revenues surged, confidence exploded. From the outside, nothing looked broken. So why was the foundation already cracking? Because the real battle had shifted away from hardware. That same year, Google partnered with HTC to launch Android. Now there were two ecosystems, iOS and Android, pulling the future away. Developers followed them, not Nokia. And once developers leave, users eventually follow. But Nokia didn't see an ecosystem war. They saw a hardware race they believed they already won. Better cameras, stronger batteries, durable designs, that was their edge. They kept improving the phone, not the experience. And that difference would cost them everything. Internally, their software platform Symbian was struggling. It couldn't handle modern apps without crashing. It wasn't built for touch, and it wasn't built for scale. Yet Nokia kept pushing it forward, hoping it would catch up. But outdated systems don't evolve, they break. And this is where the illusion became dangerous. Nokia wasn't losing customers yet. They were still winning sales, still leading globally. But underneath that growth, the future was slipping away. They weren't defending their position anymore. They were defending a world that no longer existed. By 2009, Nokia knew something was wrong, so they launched what they believed would reset everything, the N97. It had better specs than the iPhone and more features on paper. Nokia called it the future, but users called it a disaster. The phone lagged, crashed, and failed basic expectations. Its touchscreen felt broken next to Apple's smooth interface. Apps barely worked, and most didn't exist at all. While Apple had tens of thousands of apps, Nokia had almost none. So why did a better phone feel so much worse? Because the problem wasn't hardware, it was software. Symbian couldn't support the new smartphone reality. It was complex, outdated, and collapsing under pressure. Yet Nokia kept building on top of it, hoping to catch up. But broken foundations don't support new worlds. In 2010, Stephen Elop stepped in to fix it. He studied the company and saw the truth quickly. Nokia wasn't just behind, it was trapped. So he made a decision that would define everything. And it sounded bold, even necessary. He killed Symbian and chose Microsoft's Windows Phone. The logic was simple: stand out instead of blending into Android. With Microsoft, Nokia could control its destiny. On Android, they would just be another manufacturer. But differentiation only works if the platform wins. Then came the moment that changed everything. Elop sent the burning platform memo to the entire company. He admitted Nokia was falling behind and needed to jump. But the memo leaked to the public within days, and suddenly customers saw Nokia as a dead end. Sales didn't decline slowly, they collapsed immediately. Symbian was now officially obsolete, but Windows wasn't ready. Nokia had abandoned its present without securing its future. They were standing between two worlds, owning neither. In that gap is where everything started to fall apart. By 2012, the collapse was no longer a possibility. It was happening in real time, in full view of the market. Nokia's smartphone share didn't decline, it disappeared, from 33% to under 3% in just a few years. So how does a market leader fall that fast? The Lumia launch was supposed to save them. New design, new system, a fresh start with Microsoft. But the reality was brutal. The app ecosystem was empty, and users noticed immediately. A smartphone without apps wasn't a smartphone, it was a compromise. Developers had already chosen their side. iOS and Android were pulling further ahead every quarter. Nokia wasn't just competing, they were locked out. Even loyal customers began to leave, and once loyalty breaks, it rarely comes back. The numbers told the full story. Nokia's stock, once €65 at its peak, collapsed to 1.33 euros, a 98% destruction of value in just over a decade. A company that once defined an industry was now irrelevant in it. So what do you do when there's nothing left to defend? Inside Nokia, the pressure was unbearable. Losses were mounting, confidence was gone, and time was running out. This wasn't a turnaround anymore, it was survival. Every decision now carried existential risk, and one final move would decide whether Nokia disappears or transforms. In 2013, Nokia made a decision that looked like surrender. They agreed to sell their entire phone business to Microsoft for $7.2 billion, the same division that built the brand, the same division that once dominated the world. So why would they walk away from the only thing people knew them for? Because by then, it wasn't an asset anymore. It was a liability, burning cash every quarter. Holding onto it meant slow collapse. Selling it meant immediate survival. And Nokia chose survival over pride. But this wasn't just a sale. It was a reset. Nokia didn't give everything away. They kept their patents, their cash, and something most people ignored: a network infrastructure business, quietly running in the background. And that hidden piece would change everything. At the same time, they made another move. They bought out their partner in the network division, taking full control. Suddenly, Nokia wasn't a phone company anymore. It was becoming something else entirely, something less visible but far more powerful. Then came the twist no one expected. Just 2 years later, Microsoft wrote off $7.6 billion on the same deal, more than they originally paid. Thousands of jobs were cut and the strategy collapsed. The business Nokia sold turned out to be worthless. Which means Nokia didn't just escape, they escaped at the perfect moment. They didn't lose their core. They sold it right before it hit zero. Selling the phone business bought Nokia time, but time alone doesn't build a future. Now they had cash, assets, and a second chance. What they didn't have was a clear identity. So what does a fallen giant become next? In 2014, Rajiv Suri took control. Unlike his predecessor, he knew the company from the inside. He had already fixed the network division once. Now he had to turn it into Nokia's entire future. And that required a much bigger bet. Nokia wasn't strong enough yet. Rivals like Ericsson and Huawei offered full telecom solutions. Nokia only had pieces of the puzzle. To compete, they needed everything, end-to-end infrastructure, and building that from scratch would take too long. So in 2015, Nokia made a massive move. Nokia acquired Alcatel-Lucent for 15.6 billion euros, a company nearly as complex as Nokia itself. It wasn't a safe investment, it was a transformation, and if it failed, Nokia wouldn't recover twice. But the payoff was immediate and strategic. Alcatel-Lucent brought IP routing, optical networks, and fixed infrastructure. More importantly, it brought Bell Labs, one of the most advanced research centers ever built. With over 20,000 patents, it gave Nokia something it had lost: a technological edge in the next generation. Now the company looked completely different. No phones, no consumer brand, just infrastructure powering global communication. Invisible to users, but essential to everything they do. Nokia hadn't come back, it had reinvented itself. And for a moment, the strategy worked. The new Nokia positioned itself as the Western alternative to Huawei. As global tensions rose, that positioning became an advantage. Carriers needed a trusted supplier, and Nokia stepped in. But rebuilding a company is one challenge, staying on top is another. For a brief moment, Nokia looked unstoppable again. By 2020, it had secured over 100 commercial 5G deals worldwide. Major carriers signed on, and the strategy seemed to be working. After years of rebuilding, Nokia was finally back in the race. So why did that momentum suddenly disappear? Because early wins don't guarantee long-term dominance. Competitors adapted faster, executed better, and priced more aggressively. Samsung began taking critical contracts. Ericsson doubled down on performance and scale. And Nokia started losing the deals that mattered most. The turning point came with Verizon, a $6.6 billion contract gone almost overnight. One of Nokia's biggest customers walked away, not because of vision, but execution gaps. And that loss signaled something deeper. It didn't stop there. AT&T followed, shifting toward Ericsson in a $14 billion deal. They even announced plans to remove Nokia equipment entirely. This wasn't just competition, it was replacement. And once infrastructure gets replaced, it rarely returns. The financial impact was immediate. By early 2025, profits in mobile networks dropped 89%, from a core growth engine to near collapse again. After everything Nokia rebuilt, they were back at the edge. So the question returned, what now? Because this time there was no obvious asset left to sell, no easy reset, no hidden division to fall back on, just a shrinking position in a brutally competitive market, and a future that was starting to look uncertain again. But this time the opportunity wouldn't come from inside Nokia. It would come from a company building the future of AI. By 2025, Nokia was running out of moves. Its 5G momentum had stalled and key contracts were gone. The rebuild was real, but so was the pressure. Another slow decline was starting to form. So where does a telecom giant turn when networks stop growing? On October 28, 2025, Jensen Huang stepped onto the stage in Washington. He wasn't there to talk about gaming or GPUs. He was there to talk about infrastructure, specifically the future of AI beyond data centers, and why the current system wasn't enough. Because AI had a limitation no one could ignore. It was fast, but only inside centralized servers. Every request still had to travel across networks, and that delay made real-time intelligence impossible. So what happens when machines need to think instantly? The answer was the edge, AI running directly where data is generated, inside cars, drones, factories, and most importantly, telecom towers. But building that required something NVIDIA didn't have, a global network infrastructure already in place. That's where Nokia came in. Unlike its competitors, Nokia's architecture could integrate AI directly. It didn't need a full rebuild, just an upgrade. That made it uniquely positioned for this shift, and in a market of giants, that difference mattered. So NVIDIA made its move, a $1 billion investment into Nokia, not just funding, but commitment. NVIDIA had the chips, Nokia had the towers. Together, they could redefine how networks work. This wasn't about faster internet, it was about turning networks into computing platforms, towers that don't just transfer data but process it in real time, reducing latency, cutting energy use, and enabling instant decisions, a completely different kind of infrastructure. The market reacted immediately. Nokia's stock jumped 22% in a single day, its biggest gain in over a decade. Suddenly, the company wasn't a struggling telecom anymore. It was part of the AI future. But this wasn't a guaranteed comeback. It was a bet on a market that doesn't exist yet, on technology that's still being built, and on execution Nokia had struggled with before. Because the real question isn't whether AI will transform networks, it's whether Nokia can finally execute when it matters most.
Nokia's story looks like a collapse, but it's really a sequence of decisions under pressure. Each one changed the company's direction and its survival, from total dominance to near bankruptcy to reinvention. So what actually saved Nokia? The first lesson is simple but brutal. Sell the thing you're famous for before it becomes worthless. In 2013, Nokia sold its phone business to Microsoft for $7.2 billion. At the time, it looked like surrender. 2 years later, Microsoft wrote off more than it paid. Most companies wait too long. They protect the past until it collapses completely. Nokia did the opposite. It let go while there was still value left. And that decision bought them a future. The second lesson is counterintuitive. Spend crisis money on transformation, not survival. After the sale, Nokia had billions in cash. They could have stabilized and played it safe. Instead, they made a $15.6 billion acquisition. Buying Alcatel-Lucent wasn't defensive. It was aggressive, risky, and necessary. They weren't trying to survive, they were trying to evolve. And that shift changed their entire position. Because survival keeps you alive, But transformation changes your trajectory. The third lesson is the most overlooked. Your next business might already exist inside your company. Nokia didn't invent something new after the collapse. They scaled something they already had, a network division most people ignored for years. That hidden asset became the foundation of everything, from 5G infrastructure to partnerships with companies like NVIDIA. The future wasn't built from nothing. It was built from something overlooked, and that's what most companies miss. Nokia lost the smartphone war. There's no way to rewrite that outcome. But losing didn't end the company. It forced it to change. From devices in your hand to systems behind everything you use. Nokia didn't stop connecting people. It just became invisible while doing it.